Hello, everyone. Welcome to Osquery Office Hours. Happy New Year, first one of the year. And yeah, we have something like an agenda. So moving on. Announcements since the last meeting. It's kind of the big one is we merged M1 support. So yay! Big thank you to Trail of Bits for writing that, and to I guess Charvel and I for reviewing that, and whoever else Trail of Bits wants to thank. I don't know if other people have other announcements.
Yeah, I guess we have a blog post coming maybe, but Mike will tell us more about it maybe in the next office hours because I don't really know much about it.
I hear there's one coming, but
yeah.
Okay, probably no more announcements. Questions, issues, PRs people want to discuss. General intent here is community members who happen to be here that want to bring up anything. I think I see a new name, maybe. Dodge, I don't recognize your name. Welcome. If you want to talk about anything, here's a real open section. No pressure.
Hi. Was happy to see a lot of facial hair here. Makes me feel very welcome. Go on this video. No, I work for some folks, I believe some folks from some. So I'm just really interested in the support and had an open slot in my day, so I thought I'd come and listen and see how it's going.
Welcome.
Is the audio cutting out for anyone else?
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I couldn't hear much of that.
Oh, I just came to sit in and listen. My company's very interested in the M1 support, and I know that's kind of been rolling along. I had an empty slot in my day and thought I'd come and listen in and see what that was about and how it was rolling.
Awesome. I can hear you much better now. Thank you. And what company are you with?
A company called Sophos. I
Go
believe
familiar.
there's other folks from the company who've showed up to this in the past.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay, well, sounds like no community questions, so jumping into agenda. Probably the first item is the 5.1.0 release. So we cut this release in the beginning of December, and somewhere in the middle of December, it seemed stable enough. I have not yet pushed it to stable because I didn't want anyone to hit auto update during the Christmas New Year's vacation. So I'll try and push that out to stable today unless anyone has any problems with it. I don't even know if anyone else has tested it extensively, but so I think 5.1.0 should go to stable. Any objections? Probably not. Cool. Yay. Okay. 5.2.0. I delayed because I didn't want to anyone's like RPM repos to trigger auto updates while everyone was on vacation and have someone have a bad time of that. So 5.2.0. So I cut 5.2.0 in the last days of December, and I ran our build scripts, and then Alessandro and I iterated on the build scripts, and there's a build up on GitHub.
Yeah, thanks so much for the code reviews. I had a couple of brain farts. What's the name of it? With the script, hopefully it works now. We have to restore the main branch in the private repository because I had to switch it. Because maybe there's a way to do it, but I don't know. Starting a workflow from a branch that is not the active one.
Yeah, there's just a thing you can fill in. Start workflow from branch.
Oh yeah, then I'm stupid.
There's a toggle.
That's what I usually do.
Yeah. So yeah, we have to just switch back the default branch to main.
All right, we can do that. It's no big deal.
Thanks.
I don't know that there's any bugs outstanding in 5.2.0. Like I think y'all got all the CMake stuff out the door. I think CI is in okay shape. I think we just need to finish the merges off in code sign land, and that's kind of just cleanup. So as far as I know, 5.2.0's beta builds on GitHub are good. I haven't tested them yet.
Yeah, nice.
Is the CI back working again?
I think so.
Yeah, but we have some pull requests that are based on the pre-M1 that needs to be rebased. Otherwise, the CI checks would show us only partially completed.
You can also close and reopen the pull request.
Yeah.
So I threw up a PR and then haven't gone and looked at it. That creates, I don't know if this is a good idea, but one of the things that's a little bit weird, right, is you can have like any number of CI actions, jobs, GitHub actions, and then you flag some of them as required. And correlating these is a little bit weird. Like you sort of, a job has to run and then its name exists, and then you basically just like cut and paste the name into the GitHub settings. So I created a meta job that sort of depends on the other jobs, so it's sort of more in source control. And I think this is really similar to what Alessandro had done in Azure a little while ago. Excuse me, what Stefano had done in Azure a little while ago.
Yeah, Stefano did it, and then when I ported to GitHub Actions, I broke it.
So there's a PR up that we could take, either Stefano or Alessandro or Zach, if you want to look at it. It's a pretty simple one. It's just another GitHub action that does nothing but depend on earlier GitHub actions. And the idea would be to use that as the required passing gatekeeper and then not have to like name all of the weird subjobs.
Yeah,
I
that's
can
great.
I can definitely take a look at that. I've been looking at GitHub Actions a lot lately.
Yeah, same. It's a
Where is there a link to that in this agenda right now?
not really.
Can you just tell me the number?
Yeah, 7427.
Okay.
So we could sneak that in a little bit. Feel free to be like, no, this is terrible, or change or whatever. You'll read it. It's simple. Other than that, people should test 5.2.0. I'll probably start trying to test the pre-releases as soon as I get 5.1.0 out the door. But when I was testing the PRs, it looked beautiful, so I have high hopes. Anyone want to say anything else about 5.2.0?
Not really. We changed some of the build flags in the libraries, so it is worth doing some additional testing on this build before we mark it as stable. Hopefully everything will be fine, but if not, we can always cut a new 5.2.1 release maybe.
Or a 5.3, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
Whatever makes sense. Okay. Huge congratulations all around. I mean, sort of underplaying that a little bit. Like, it was a massive amount of work. So awesome job getting a new architecture out. So next up, someone added adding and removing TSC members, maybe adding minimum participation guidelines to the charter. This was a mic agenda item. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about this.
I think I'm not the one who wrote this, but yeah, I'm in favor of updating the membership based on. I don't know if we really have to boot people out. That's something you can decide, but at least maybe we can move them as, I don't know, a inactive members group.
So I could okay, so I think we only have one inactive member right now. And I would be okay saying, we should just take inactive members off. And I would be okay saying, practically speaking, it's not a problem. Let's just keep ignoring this. Kind of curious where other people land.
I guess the major problem is being able to decide how, whenever we want to resolve a problem that requires a TSC, it would be nice to have more clear rules on the on how the outcome is decided. Like if we have 5 members, do we need 5 votes for something, or is it enough to only have a couple of them from the active members? And what happens if ATSC members decide to ignore something that we're voting for? Is it sufficient to have a quorum of at least X amount of people after a certain deadline? And things like that, so that we can more easily push things forward.
So I believe our charter says, and I'm not reviewing at this moment, that we need quorum, and quorum consists of at least half of the members, or maybe the majority of the members or something. And then majority vote once you have achieved quorum. The thing I'm sort of weighing in my head is, practically speaking, I don't feel like we have run into a problem. The number of times we have needed sort of a TSC approval on something has been maybe once, and we didn't have a lot of trouble getting it. So I don't want to create a lot of process or rules around solving a problem that we don't have yet.
So I wanted to mention, I kind of had this problem with the pull request that I was trying to block. And I wasn't really able to push things forward.
That's fair. I feel like I kind of didn't want to poke that. I was being conflict avoidant.
Yeah, I totally understand. I'm also not usually happy about blocking pull requests or performing this kind of task. But sometimes we are forced to.
No, that's true.
I think we were all third that I was being conflict avoidant with that as well. But I'm not sure that we needed like a majority TSC decision or anything like that to make those actions on those pull requests. So I'm not sure this will solve that problem. On the other hand, I am totally on board for updating the membership of the TSC and updating the expectations for like someone to remain in good standing or that kind of thing.
I think it especially wouldn't solve the problem because both Zach and I were avoiding that. Sorry, Alessandro. And both Zach and I are plenty active, so like it wouldn't help.
Yeah, you are.
Help at all.
Right. I mean, that situation was a hard problem that is not addressed by having a TSC so much if the TSC can't get kind of aligned on where to go. And I think we were all a little bit reluctant to take a strong position there.
Yeah, on my side, or rather on our side, even we have many people with right commit access, but we don't really want to use that power. Let's say we don't even merge our own pull requests, and we would prefer to speak to you all and solve these things together. And so I think, even though I may have an opinion, I don't really like to take action without asking you first. And so, yeah, I don't really have a solution for this.
Yeah, I mean, going back to like the makeup of the committee, like I wonder if we should try to establish some sort of like minimum participation level, such as you need to participate at least once a month by either attending in office hours or reviewing pull requests or contributing code or something. But I don't know. Not that it has to be super rigid either.
I think I'm worried about creating rigid rules. So if we think about, so there are 3 of us here right now, and there are 3 absent TSC members. One of those is pretty inactive. Like Grub is basically pretty inactive, and he said when he changed jobs a while ago. He was like, I'm not sure I'm going to have time for Osquery. Like, y'all want to take me off, that's cool. And he's been pretty inactive since he changed jobs some time back. The other two are Teddy and Nick. And Teddy hasn't made it to an office hour since he changed jobs, but he's still somewhat active in PRs. And I think, personally, I'm going to wait and see where Teddy shakes himself out as. I haven't talked to Nick recently, though Nick is at least somewhat active. Again, mostly in PRs. So I don't want to create rules because I feel like we're really still evolving. If we want to say, okay, we should basically remove Groob because he's pretty inactive, and that has the TSC presenting as a more active body with sort of less weird cruft in it. I could get behind that, right? Just saying, like, so if someone comes into the project and they're like, well, I recognize these names, but who's this person, right? That could make sense to me more than trying to create rules or something. But that's kind of maybe where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I don't think it has to become something that we use to remove people from the TSC, but even something that just changes how the quorum is reached. Like if a member has not been active for a couple of months, it doesn't count toward the quorum required of the half members.
I would
For
rather
example, I don't know.
I would rather we just get better at removing people if that's a problem. But like, I don't think we've missed a quorum call. Like, there's been only one time in my memory that we've attempted to establish quorum, maybe two.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're talking about doing is adding more folks who are more active to the committee, and doing that would also likely achieve the same goal of being able to get to a quorum. Because, for example, if we had Charvel and Stefano, then it wouldn't be like it is today, where if one of Alessandro, Steph, and I don't attend, then we can't get quorum. And I guess also it's perhaps arguable whether 3 of 6 is quorum or if it has to be 4. But I don't.
So I would like to get Charvel first inside, as has been a great member of the community and is not from Trail of Bits. But I also want Stefan, of course. But yeah.
There's precedent for having 2 members from a single organization. Like Facebook had 2 members from a single organization.
So did Collide.
Yeah, that is true. But they were like, I both Teddy and Nick are founders, and Zach is also a founder. I mean, pretty much everyone is a founder except me.
Yeah, but I don't think it doesn't necessarily matter like who's was a founding part of that
I don't think
team
it matters at all.
at Facebook. Personally, my feeling is like I'd love to just add Stefano and Charvel as recognition for all of the work that they put into this project, as like vote of confidence in their decision making around these things, and it's just like helping them advance in their careers through getting that kind of recognition. Similarly, to call Seth whatever it was, the chair or something like that. I think all of this is effectively just recognizing where people are at realistically in a more, where people are at currently in a more formal sense, and I'm happy to do those kind of things. I would consider, if we ever, I make it no secret that I want to expand the Osquery team here at Fleet, and I think if we were to ever end up with 3, then I'd probably be looking at like maybe I should be stepping back myself, and we should maybe try and keep it capped at 2 people per organization or something like that. Or at least certainly make it so that we can't have one organization that can like establish quorum and then make decisions.
I really don't want to make rules about that, because I think we also run into things where like at least right now, Fleet, right? If we get to a point where Fleet ends up employing many of the Osquery developers, then like we're not really going to be able to avoid that kind of situation. So let's not worry about that. As long as, Fleet seems reasonably open source driven and is employing people to do the work we think we want to do, and like Zach is one of the early, if not beginning Osquery people, like that. I see the conflict of interest, but I also think that we do the best we can do with the resources we have. I feel like I'm always somewhat conservative about organization change. I don't know that I'm right, but I'm just like, adding new people, I don't know. How do I feel? I feel like I come at it less from recognizing work and more from, I like the vote for future confidence in work. That seems more in line with how I think of like, here's a hypothetical person who we like their judgment. We think they should help us guide the project. Let's go for that. That makes much more sense to me than saying, you've churned a lot of PRs. You've been super great here, because those feel really different to me. And I mostly want to recognize that. I'm trying not to speak to the two people we're talking about because I'm thinking in theory. The way we've done this in the past, if I remember right, is we've basically created foundation GitHub issues. So sort of I'd say make a proposal, probably 2 of them or 3 of them, depending on how you feel like breaking that up, and we can just vote in GitHub, I guess. I don't think I'm opposed. I'm like thinking, do I, for the 3 things you suggested, am I suitable as chair? I guess so. Boy, that feels weird. Do I abstain? And how do I feel about Stefano and Charvel? Am I on board? Do I want to abstain? I feel a little weird talking about them in a recorded meeting with them. And it's just very weird. I'm sorry. Like I have these different bars for commit access and like TSC member, and I don't know that mine are right. I think about commit access as being someone who I effectively trust with the management of all source code. And I have like the TSC feels a little bit like, what do we think the direction we want Osquery to move in is, and how do we shape that and how do we guide that? And I feel like I have been remiss in not writing down things. I feel like we kind of have this sense between all of us of where it goes, and I feel like I really want to get better about writing it down or nominating someone to write it down, right? But I think we have these core principles that we sort of have in our heads and we kind of agree on. We sort of hone as we like get controversial PRs and decide if we accept or not. I feel like the real job of the TSC is to shape those principles and to make sure that the committers is large enough to sustain the project. And I don't feel terribly worried about having a large or a small TSC because I think the role is sort of fundamentally organizational and not project driven. Others may disagree. I feel like I should go read a book on open source governance too, and I haven't done that. But that's kind of where I'm coming at it all from.
That all makes sense to me. I'm happy to follow up on this via issues in the foundation repo. And I think, to your idea that it's about vision setting and stuff, I completely agree, because anyone with commit access does get to decide what makes it in and what doesn't, and is explicitly trusted with doing that. When I think about who we've got on the TSC currently in terms of being able to set our vision, I think we've got you and I, Seth, who have very much the perspective of like the vendor, the Osquery fleet manager, and the consumer of Osquery data. We've got Alessandro, whose expertise, especially these days, is really in the BPF stuff, which I think is going to be an important part of the future of Osquery. And then when I look at Charvel and Stefano, it's like Stefano, I know, has been really involved with container-related stuff, which I also think is going to be super important to the future of Osquery. And Charvel is very, very involved in Mac OS kind of stuff, which I also think is going to be really important to the future of Osquery. So to me, there's compelling reasons to like bring them in, not only to recognize their skills, but also, like you said, to recognize that we want their kind of influence in decision making and the future of where this project is heading. And all of that said, of course, everyone gets to attend these meetings and influence the decision making. And realistically, we've rarely ever voted on things formally as the TSC in a way that's, that would dramatically shift the direction of the project.
I got nothing else to say.
Sounds good. Should we move on? We'll follow up on GitHub then.
I think that's reasonable. Performance audit throttling PR needs review. Is this a thing people want to talk about, or is this just a general, like, please review this PR?
Yeah, it's please review this PR. Originally, Zach has reviewed it. He left a suggestion. I updated the PR to resolve that suggestion, so it needs a last review. I originally wanted to have it in 5.2, but since times were pretty short for that, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, there were a
Anyway.
bunch of things I thought we kind of wanted to get in, and then
Yeah. No, that's
I just cut it so you had it by the end of the year.
yeah, totally. Yeah. Thank you.
Where is
Okay.
this in the agenda here?
I
This
just-
is way up top.
I just moved it.
Got it.
Just moved it to the top. Next up, unintuitive joins.
So, yeah, this starts. The base for this is again the proposal I have done last office hours about changing how we use and we think about the GADs on Windows. So yeah, we come to the conclusion that we don't want to make that sudden change to some or all the tables. But so the original issue that like made me look into this is that there's a query in FleetDM, and sorry, I'm mentioning FleetDM, but which is the current case, but it's a common query I've seen in other places, where simply does a users and groups join via GID, and this though on instances of this query installed on a Windows Server VC causes performance issue where this query gets killed, and since it's a distributed query, this query gets also rerun every time and ends up causing a high LSAS usage on Windows beyond issues on Osquery. So I was originally trying to, so first I identified a problem in the Osquery code via this join issue due to the fact that you do not have fast filtering on the GAD, etc. And so that's why my initial proposal. But then I was also wondering at this point, what is that query giving you, providing you? Because on Linux, the difference between the primary and there is a difference between primary and secondary groups, meaning that like secondary groups are only checked in some cases when the or let me say it differently. For instance, you write a file, that file will have only the primary group on it. It will not carry with any secondary groups. So when you are matching users and groups, joining the users and groups table, you are getting only the primary groups. And so that result, I understand that is useful because, again, primary groups are special. But you are still missing secondary groups. But on Windows instead, there is there isn't a difference between primary groups and secondary groups, and actually a file can have it can have multiple groups in it because it's depends on the account that has wrote it. So I'm actually coming to the question of, does it even make sense to make that query or even have that column, the GAD column on the users table? Shouldn't the user always retrieve all the groups, like join the users group, the users table with another table that provides all the groups that user is part of? Because I don't understand what's the usefulness of having a partial view, so only the first group that the user is part of.
So if I understand right, you're pointing out that on Windows, there's no primary group. So what business do we have with the primary GID column?
So there is, but as far as I know, there is no difference in practice between the primary groups and secondary groups. And also I could add that normally when you create a user, the primary group is actually domain users, which is a built-in group. And actually on the users table, we are not showing that group because it's not present at all on the groups table, but we are, so there are a bit of nuances. We are actually taking the first local group we can find, if we can find it. Otherwise, we are returning the primary group, which is domain users. What I'm saying is that all of this logic is already causing the users table to be a bit slower to return results. Plus the join have that additional issue. And plus I'm wondering, we are still retrieving partial results for the groups user is part of. So I'm questioning what is the usefulness of that view, and if we shouldn't change how those tables work, or require basically that the user obtains all the groups, because it can even be harmful for the users to maybe to only see part of the result and think that, again, a user is only part of that single group.
So I was going to ask you how it's generated, and you helpfully answered. What you said is that users do have a primary group, which is often just domain users. There is value in that because that's the kind of thing that can be used to filter what class of user someone is. But if we're throwing that away in favor of taking the first secondary group because whoever wrote the table thought that that was a meaningless piece of data, that's terrible.
So yeah, no. So the thing is that where we always said that the users table or the groups table only returns local group, and since, I mean, it's true, there is a bit of confusion there. Domain users, it's a built-in group, and technically, since it exists locally, it's, even though it's part of the domain concept, it's actually a local group. So technically, maybe it's still a local group, and we should show that. But then again, yeah, the question is, the thing is, I have a user on my normal Windows computer, and again, I'm inside domain users, but then when you query that, you don't know that maybe I'm also inside administrators, which might be more interesting. So that's what I'm wondering again, that if you are only querying the users table and also joining to the groups table to understand that number, what it is exactly, you're only getting the primary group, which might not give you enough information on the permissions that user has. So I'm questioning the usefulness.
Is this doesn't feel different than Mac OS or Linux?
It does, because the primary groups, so yes and no. Like primary groups are used when you are, for instance, logging in via SSH, or again, when you create files, your primary group is set to that file.
I mean,
so they have a slightly different meaning.
That's true, but if you think about Linux, modern
yeah.
Linux, everyone's using eponymous groups anyhow. So the primary group is effectively meaningless. It's like modern Linux doesn't use shared primary groups. So it's an almost meaningless piece of information. Like technically it has meaning, but semantically no one uses it for anything anymore. Which is maybe a long way of saying I would totally be in favor of ripping that column out of Windows.
Yeah, okay, I see, yeah.
Because I think you're right that like the existence of that column with incorrect data probably just encourages bad behaviors. And I am generally not in favor of keeping bad data around. So I think either we say the primary group is as Windows defines it, or we say, just null the column because the primary group is like maybe not a local group, and that's just going to confuse everyone. So like I could go in either direction there, but I think you're right that the current behavior is definitely a bug. I might even, I don't know, the whole primary group concept, I think it just means so much less now than it did 20 years ago. So
yeah, to clarify, in the end, one would have to do a double join. Yeah, because it's like joining the users table against the user groups table, which is currently providing a match on the GAD, although in the I'm going to add actually a group seed, which should provide better performance, and then you are joining that one. Well, the result of that join against the groups table to finally get detailed information of each group. And yeah. The other thing there maybe is that the users groups table has to be optimized, because right now, well, if possible, right now it is actually querying the users table to get all the users to loop through. And so possibly that is also inefficient, because if you are only interested in a single UID, it is still requiring all the users from the users table. So yeah, anyway, this is maybe a tangent, but there are some optimization to be done there too.
I mean, it sort of has this other interesting question where I feel like we have a mismatch between OS APIs and the SQLite model, which is, if you look at users in groups or something, right, and you say a lot of the time people are just going to want to join these, but not always. So we sort of have these different interfaces to gather users and groups, but then we can't make an optimized path when you just want both together, because I don't think SQLite exposes it in the right way. Right? You almost want to say, if these are being joined, run this other generate function completely.
Yeah, or, well, the thing is that we shouldn't. So currently, again, is using an internal SQL query to query the function. We should just create building block functions that we can reuse on the user groups table, so that it automatically uses the fastest path. I think that like the main issue is just not duplicating the code, the logic of the users table on the user groups table. Yeah,
that seems reasonable. It sounds like there's a lot of cleanup here, and I feel like a bunch of it is straightforward. You know, like there's some n+1 recursion going on that sounds like it's just a bug that we can fix. I think the GID sounds like nonsense, and we should just not set it to null on Windows. It sounds like you've got some other things. I feel like any of those seem uncontroversial. So I'd just do them. Or if you're motivated, you could just do them and we could review them.
Yeah. Maybe. So I don't want, I'll make the question, but the answer can not come here, come later. But I'm also interested, I haven't looked at that close. Well, I haven't looked at FlipDM that close yet. I was wondering if anything can be done on that specific query and how much it is needed, more than useful, needed for the UI itself. Like to provide a quick
Stefano, do you know exactly what the
improvement.
query is?
Yeah, it's I think it's Fleet DM detailed users or user detail. Let me check. I have a log with the name.
And it's like users join groups or something like that.
Yeah, it joins users and groups on the GAD column.
Okay, there's a query, select UID, username type, group name shell from users U left join groups G on G.gid equals U.gid.
Yeah, that should be the one.
And the problem, I mean, I'm just looking at this. I'm not sure that we actually render the group information in the UI, so we might be able to just get rid of it. We definitely render the shell information in the UI. Yeah. So your question, Stefano, is like, will this cause problems for us if you make the group null?
Sorry, come again. For you as FlipDM, you mean?
Yeah. Or like, what do you need us to change that would help?
Oh, well, so yeah, I I didn't try, but I recall Seth was saying it is probably possible with CTE. Is it possible with any other trickery, like with CTEs to temporarily cache results, like from the group table, and again temporarily have a faster query? But again, I don't know. Like it's either FlipDM does the change first, or we try to improve Osquery code first. And even then, though, there is the problem that even so, if we are going to remove the GAD column from the users table, and we are forcing to get all the groups, there is the caveat that it is going to be actually slower than taking. So it's the view will be complete, sort of, but it will be slower. So we are kind of back with the problem of performance.
Yeah.
So yeah, the problem is that we have two issues, like again, the representation and how we are using that information, which is partially also causing a performance issue. But then again, separately, there is the performance issue that will probably stay there depending on the query you are doing.
And Stefano, you were saying that primarily the performance issue is when it's on a Windows domain controller because there's so many users and groups.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I mean, I'm just looking at what we're doing with this information right now, and off the top of my head, it seems like maybe we could just not collect the group's information since we don't render it, and then just get rid of the join entirely. that won't change the fact that this is often something that people have complained about, regardless of whether they're using Fleet or not, where they're like,
Yeah.
this query goes crazy on my domain controller.
Yeah, and that's why, like the very first thing I've looked at is the Osquery code, because I immediately understood that query wasn't optimized. So I think, yeah, first of all, we have to absolutely optimize in some way that kind of query, because eventually someone will want to do that query anyway. I'm only slightly derailing these these office hours, asking if there's anything that could be done differently on Fleet, but yeah, we can talk about this in another place. There's no
Sounds good.
there's no issue.
I'm happy to talk over chat or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I got 2 more items here, I think. Is this 2 more? Yeah, 2 more. Performance metrics on distributed queries.
Yeah, I haven't opened a blueprint issue yet, but I wanted some initial thoughts on what folks thought about adding metrics like CPU time or wall time to distributed query results, kind of similar to scheduled queries.
Okay. I think it's a great idea, but where would you put it?
I haven't done any LOE yet, level of effort or whatever. This will be passed as a JSON or TLS. But this is something that's been kind of going in my head.
So let me talk through this. I think for scheduled queries, we keep it in another table,
Yeah, or
Yeah.
square
Right.
schedule. Yeah.
which makes sense. For distributed queries, keeping it in a table is interesting, but we'd have to come up with some mechanism to clean that table, right? Because it's like half of it. Like you wouldn't want over the life of the Osquery process to just sort of like get thousands of distributed queries. So either we think about cleaning that a la events, or we return it with the data.
My initial thought was just having like an in-memory map, and whenever the process is rebooted, you have a clean slate.
And actually, my initial thought was just return it with the data, like we already do exit code, and we already do an error message, all as like separate bits in that JSON that's returned in that API. I would say just drop the stats in there as well.
Sorry, I'm taking notes as we go.
No, notes are helpful. Thank you.
I feel like returning it with the query fits with the prior art we have. It's kind of interesting to think about a distributed queries table that's like, you'd be able to like see what has been run. It's kind of interesting, very analogous to scheduled queries, but I really don't know how to. I feel like over the life of the process, you might see thousands or tens of thousands of distributed queries even. So I almost wonder if that is an evented table that just goes through the event life cycle with everything else. Like kind of weird.
Could also have like a ring buffer kind of like implementation for it, configurable to like past few hours or whatever. But I think returning with the data is kind of the simplest thing. And then, I don't know, maybe I can talk more in the blueprint issue.
When I think about this idea of having a table with these things, I think more about like the transparency for users aspect. Like now someone could make a simple Osquery extension that would like query for what live queries have been run like directly locally on the system, and then you don't have to necessarily trust the fleet manager or whatever. But it seems slightly orthogonal to me, or at least a big motivator for me is like I want people to be able to see more easily before they schedule a query, like what is the performance impact of that query on a couple of example hosts that they run on. And I think just returning with the results is going to be the easiest way to achieve that goal.
I would probably be
Question.
okay with both implementations.
Question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I was wondering because since I recall that distributed queries are run in parallel of scheduled queries. So, and also when we are taking stats from the scheduled query themselves, we don't really have the decision, like we are not really looking at only the query that is running, but the query that is running plus anything else that is happening in Osquery in that moment, because we are using the whole process stats. I was wondering how you would separate the distributed query stats from any parallelly running scheduled query.
The idea is not to initially separate it out, just to, it's kind of as a gauge of, if you run this on this host at this time, what the results are.
But doesn't that problem affect the existing scheduled queries stats too, though?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't aware of that issue, but it makes me think, like, can there just be a mutex on query execution that the scheduler has to get that mutex if it wants to run scheduled queries, and the distributed query system has to get that mutex if it wants to run live queries?
Do we want to be single-threaded?
There was one and got removed, and now it's the I don't know if you have noticed, but this can be seen. So if you are running a scheduled query, and then on top of that, parallelly a distributed query, Osquery will start spamming a bit about opening a transient DB connection. Yeah, exactly. And that's because originally there was a mutex there that was blocking the access to the SQL database, so that only is a single query. And that has been removed exactly to reduce the contention. But yeah, I'm not sure.
I feel like there's... So I feel like there are these high-level questions of, do we think we should only be able to exec one query at a time, or do we think that multiple threads is the way to go? So there's like a question there of, do we want it, if we had a mutex, do we want the mutex to gate query execution, or do we want it to gate something like writing into the database? And do you need to write into the database? Like, there's all these questions about there are these architectural questions there to me.
The difference there, I would say, it's a matter of what else we have, what other tooling or structure we have already in Osquery, or we are going to add. Because so right now we are not able to separate work between distributed and scheduled stuff. So I would be inclined to say, yeah, maybe we should actually rethink and run things serially. Also because it limits the usage of CPU better, because it is kind of forced to use that amount of CPU. I mean, there are other parts of Osquery events that can use more than one core. But yeah, most of the time, the majority of the time is spent in constructing the rows and writing in writing in the database, etc. Otherwise, we can do maybe something for the future is then actually have something that can differentiate per thread. And so, but then you need to have something that, like you have to have per thread, per thread profiling.
Well,
in some way, tracing what memory is allocated. That obviously more complex. But then it gives you that possibility to use multiple thread. But then the question is, do you really want to use multiple thread and risk really using all the that Osquery uses all the CPUs that is available, depending on how many threads you have? So yeah.
Yeah, I think to that question, I think my understanding of how people want to use Osquery is like, it's not the primary workload on the machine. We do not want to use up all that CPU. And we and in general, people are running scheduled queries on what intervals of like down to like 10 seconds, probably at the lowest, but typically much higher. And they're running distributed queries sometimes, and those run serially with each other, I believe. So I'm not sure. Practically, it sounds to me like it would be a win to make it so they can't, both kinds can't execute at the same time, because of issues that you described, Stefano, around how distributed queries could be currently throwing off the data for scheduled queries because of this transient whatever error that I've definitely seen that error. I didn't know that that was the reason. If other people don't have like explicit reasons why we should not do something like that, then I'd advocate pretty strongly for like gating it with a mutex or some similar approach.
I should also add that maybe the original reason for that mutex on SQLite being so the reason why it has been removed is that I think it is called multiple time inside a single query, if I'm not wrong. So it was probably too granular as a lock, while instead maybe we want a higher level lock that locks for the entire run of a single query. So that is much lighter. And, yeah, but
that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think it makes sense serializing them.
I feel a little bit like theoretically I like the idea of having multiple executors, but I agree that practically speaking, maybe it's not worth the trouble. So I think the things we're saying is probably we should bring back a mutex. Just returning performance data with a query fits the existing prior art we have, seems fine. Creating a distributed queries table seems interesting. A little bit of an open question about how we don't let it grow boundlessly. I kind of favor throwing it into the events subsystem, but maybe that's a terrible idea. Mostly like we already have a ring buffer. It's called the events system. But otherwise, none of this sounds super controversial to me. Like I think everyone's kind of on the same page for this stuff. So.
Cool, thanks. I have one last thing, and I think we're almost out of time, so I'll try to be quick. We have a couple of exit codes in Osquery. We have 78 defined as catastrophic for when config parsing fails or extension fails to register. But there are other instances where we just return 128 plus whatever signal handler catches. And I think debugging those is a little hard if you don't have that context, and there's no logging of any kind, and I think we can add more logging. Also, that code is
adding
like
logging to fatal errors is never wrong.
And that code hasn't been updated in multiple years, so and I don't know why we have 128 hard-coded. I think it's just a convention.
On Linux it is. Yeah.
One thing to note is that logging in the event of config parse failure, I think it would be reasonable to throw something on standard out, but things like the loggers may not be configured.
Yeah, so we have a Osquery system logger function just for that, which logs to standard error.
Great, let's do it.
Yeah, on Windows though is especially nasty.
Yeah, I kind of overlooked the Windows part.
What's Windows do?
The exit code is. Oh, actually, wait. Depends if it is running as a service or if it's separately run. So if it's separately run from console, it is returning the normal exit code, if I recall right. As a service, I don't recall.
One of the things I found awkward about Windows is that running things as a service needs a dramatically different logging code path than console apps. and we often ship, in Collide, we ship the same binary in both places. And depending on how you call launcher, you get completely different behaviors on Windows. So
yeah, it's annoying. You often, especially if you're debugging, you're losing the very first logs. If the issue is that the Osquery cannot correctly initialize the logger plugin, the file system logger plugin, yeah, you are screwed, basically.
yeah. Okay. I should run. Before I do, anyone have anything else? Okay. Thank you all. May you all put up wonderful PRs, and please test 5.2. I'll try and roll.
Thank you for running the
5.1 out
meeting,
door.
Sev.
Talk to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
day, y'all.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.